Hi everyone, it's Marisa from bumblebeeapothecary.com. Today I'd like to answer all of your frequently asked questions on rendering tallow. I have a video, which I'll link below, that shows my whole process for rendering and purifying tallow, and it's gotten a lot of views, and there's been some questions that have come up over and over again that I just wanted to answer all in one spot. So if you're watched that video and you still have some questions, I definitely recommend watching this video, and chances are I'll answer those questions. If you still have lingering questions, be sure and leave me a comment and I'll answer them down below. Also, stay tuned. Later in the video, I'm going to share with you a new trick that I've not really shared before anywhere that speeds up the rendering and yields a lot more tallow. You can use it with unground tallow and it makes the process so fast and easy. So stay tuned and watch for that tip. So first of all, let's go over the most common questions that come up. The first one is, do I leave the lid on the crock pot while it's rendering? And the answer is yes, I do. Now this is not a hard and fast rule. You could leave it off and you'd probably still have pretty good results, especially if you live in a pretty damp climate. I live in Colorado where it's pretty dry most of the time, and so I do leave that lid on while it's rendering, which is really good because you don't want that water evaporating, because otherwise then the tallow can start to burn. The next one that I get asked a lot is, with my method where I add salt in there to help purify the tallow, a lot of people want to know, does this make salty tallow? And the answer is no, it does not. So remember how oil and water don't mix. Tallow, when it's melted, it's like an oil, and it does not mix with the water. The salt stays in the water and it helps to draw the impurities out of the tallow into the water in that special purification part of the process. So the tallow ends up very nice and pure, white, odorless, and then the impurities are drawn out by the salt into the water. The salt is in the water, it gets dumped when you do the step where you scrape the tallow cake and dump the water. The next question would be, does this really produce tallow that is completely odorless? And that's a great question. So here's the thing. The type of tallow, the quality of tallow that you use is going to make a difference whether there's any finished smell or not. Some people's noses are more sensitive than others, but in the whole broad range of tallow rendering, this method produces the most odorless tallow that there is. And most people, including myself, when it's made into an unscented tallow balm and you put your nose in that jar and you smell like a buttery type of smell. When you render tallow the dry method, where you don't use water and there's no purification step with salt and water, then you smell that tallow balm made with tallow with that method and it smells like a pot roast. So in the whole entire scheme of all the different methods that there are to make tallow, this will produce the most odorless tallow possible. And to most people's noses, it is indeed odorless, meaning no beefy, meaty smell. Another question that comes up sometimes is, I followed all the steps for rendering and it's not perfectly snow white. There's still a yellowish color to it. And let me explain that as well. So when I say white, I mean light colored, as in not burned brown. So when you render with the dry method, the tallow starts to burn, and so you get a much darker colored tallow. It's like a light brown color. This method, on the other hand, leaves a very light colored tallow, and white was the best way that I could think of to describe it. The color of the finished tallow that you end up with varies according to different things, especially the breed of cattle, whether or not they were 100% grass-fed and grass-finished or not. Certain breeds of cattle, especially dairy breeds like Jersey and Guernsey, will have very yellow fat. And oftentimes the more grass the cattle eat, the more yellow the fat will be. So if you do this method and your tallow is not snow white, but it has a bit of a yellow color, that's perfectly fine. That just means there's a certain breed of cattle that it came from, and or there's nutrients in there from the grass. It's a good thing. What you don't want is burden tallow that's brown. Another question that comes up is how long does it take to render? How long does, especially that first step when you put the raw beef fat in, how long does that take? And the answer is it varies a ton. It matters mostly according to how big or small your fat chunks are, if you're using ground fat or if you cut it up yourself or if you're putting big chunks in there. The smaller the pieces of fat, the faster it will render. When I render, I usually let it go that first time for 8 to 12 hours. Sometimes that could be longer than it's necessary, but I just make sure there's always water in there, there's no chance of burning, and it always turns out great. I want to make sure if I'm going through all this process of rendering and purifying to get every last bit of tallow out, so I let it go a good long amount of time. That's why I like the crock pot for doing this, because you can just set it and it's safe to have on for a long period of time. Another question that sometimes gets asked is what can I do with the water that comes after I'm done rendering? Like when you scrape the cake and you have the water left in the bottom, sometimes it's like jello. And I personally haven't ever used it for anything. I render a lot of tallow, and so I would end up with so much, but I usually just give it to my chickens, so that's a use. Some people have had the idea of adding it to like a soup as part of the stock or broth, and I think that's a great idea. You would just want to take into consideration the salt. Make sure and taste your soup to make sure that it's not going to be too salty, but that could be a great use. Some other questions that come up sometimes are consistency questions. Sometimes people will be like, I rendered it following all the steps and it's rock hard. It's so hard, I can't do anything with it. Or somebody will say, I followed all the directions correctly and it's so soft. Like, I didn't expect it to be this soft. You probably did it right. You probably didn't do anything wrong. The thing is, tallow varies in consistency due to all kinds of different factors. The breed of cattle, the time of year, what they happen to be eating right then, the grass or hay, all that kind of stuff. Probably even more factors besides that. Another thing to keep in mind is that the leaf fat around the internal organs of the cattle is going to be harder, while the trim fat from under the skin and other places is going to be softer in general. You can use both. They both have great benefits. The leaf fat does tend to be higher in nutrients, so if you have a choice, you can use just that. But the main thing to remember is that if your tallow turned out softer or harder than you expected, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just the way it is. It varies. So if you have soft tallow, then you can make skincare very easily that you don't have to add any liquid oil to if you want. If you have harder tallow, you'll definitely need to add liquid oil if you're making skincare. But that's just how it is. Tallow is an unrefined natural product, and it varies. Another question sometimes that gets asked is, I already rendered some tallow using another method, like a dry method, and it has a really strong beefy smell. Can I do the purification steps and get rid of that beefy smell? And the answer is, if the beefy smell comes from the tallow being too hot, chances are the purifying steps are not really going to help completely. They might help some, so it could be worth a try, but if it came from burning the first time it was rendered, you're probably not going to completely get rid of the smell. But the good news is tallow with a smell or beefy taste like that is great for cooking, because you actually want some flavor like that for cooking. Another question that comes up is along the lines of, so what method should I use for cooking? Like, do I need to use this purifying step if I want to use it for cooking? And just like I mentioned a little bit ago, not necessarily. You can. It makes wonderful tallow for cooking, especially if you want like a milder use, if you're using it in pastries or something. But if you're frying, making French fries or something like that, you probably do want some beefy flavor. So a faster, less labor-intensive dry rendering method can be just fine for cooking. But if you want it for soap or skincare and things like that, then you probably don't want the beefy smell. So the purifying method and the wet rendering method with purifying steps is the way to go. Another question that sometimes comes up is, when I'm letting the tallow solidify in the bowl after I've strained it, is it okay to leave it at room temperature? And the answer is yes. Tallow is a very stable fat at room temperature, so it's perfectly okay. If you have tallow on the softer side, you'll probably want to let it sit in the refrigerator or outside if it's a cold day. That way it'll be easier to pop it out of the bowl. It won't be as soft. Most of the time tallow is hard enough though that you can just let it harden at room temperature and work with it after that, and it works great. All right, and now for the tip that you've been waiting for that speeds up tallow rendering so much, increases the yield, and makes it easy to render even if you don't have ground fat. So I get beef fat from a variety of places. Some of the places will grind it for me and some of it won't. So for the places that won't grind it, I get packages that are like 2 to 3 pounds of beef fat in a shrink wrapped package. So I plop a couple of those into my crock pot and then add the salt and water. So in the past, I've tried different ways of trying to grind it in a food processor or cut it up by hand, and that takes so much time. So I discovered this trick. So like I said, I plop it all in the crock pot, big old chunks just as they are. I turn it on, I let it start rendering. After, I want to say 4 hours or so, 4 to 6 hours, when the fat is all cooked through, heated through, and very soft, I take my immersion blender and then I go in there and I just whiz up all of the fat, tissue, meat, whatever's there. I whiz it all up until it's a soupy mixture. Then I let it finish rendering for the rest of the time, so for a total of 8 to 12 hours. Usually I go towards 12 because I want to make sure to get all that tallow. And then after the rendering process is done, every bit of fat will be rendered. There will be nothing big enough to be left. I probably don't need to let it go quite 12 hours when it's this small. I just do, because like I said, those fat chunks are whizzed up so small that they render very quickly. You can just kind of keep an eye on it if you're trying this method yourself, and once you think that it looks like everything's rendered and not raw anymore, you can probably go ahead and strain it. So then after that, I strain it just through a mesh strainer, no cheesecloth or anything for that first step. Let it solidify in the bowls, pop it out, scrape the bottom of the tallow cake, and then I do my purification step. I usually just do one, but you can do more if you like. And then after that, it's strained through the cheesecloth for the next step, the metal strainer with the cheesecloth inside it. You can refer to my video, which I'll link below, that has all the details. But I did want to share that immersion blender trick for whizzing up big chunks of fat. It saves you so much time over trying to cut them or grind them, or if the meat packing place won't grind it for you and you don't know what to do. I've actually even used it on ground fat. So I put the ground fat in the crock pot, let it start cooking, get soft, and then whiz it up because it just speeds it up. So hopefully you find that really helpful. I know it was life-changing for me. Okay, I think that covers just about all of the questions that people have been asking about rendering tallow. So I hope that answered your questions. I hope you found it useful. If you have more that I didn't answer here, be sure and leave me a comment. Be sure and check out that video too if you haven't. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share it with anybody else who you think would like it. If you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out 2 new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.